Dear students, myself Maya Rani. Today we are going to discuss NTA Test Series 11 Zoology. Let us move into question. First question. An undifferentiated layer mesoglea is present in. You know that mesoglea is a gelatinous structure present between ectoderm and endoderm. So ectoderm and endoderm is the characteristic feature of diploblastic organisms. Diploblastic organisms will come under phylum Porifera, Coelenterata and Ctenophora. So now we can look into the option 1, Fasciola. You know that it is liver fluke, come under the phylum Platyhelminthes. Next one, Ancylostoma, that is a nematode. Next one, Hirudinaria, that is an annelid. Next one, Adamsia. Adamsia, you know that it is come under the phylum Coelenterata. So I told you that mesoglea, that is the characteristic feature of diploblastic organism, that is Porifera, Coelenterata and Ctenophora. So from the option you can understand that the answer is Adamsia, will come under the phylum Coelenterata. Move into the next question. Every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver around. So if you are seeing oxygenated blood in the question, first thing you have to remember, oxygenated blood moves from lungs to tissue. From lungs to tissue. If you are seeing an oxygenated in question, first you have to remember it is moving from lungs to the tissue. So in the question, if they are giving as deoxygenated, in the question you are seeing deoxygenated blood, you can assume that it is from tissue to lungs. So when I am saying that, you can understand that, see, every 100 ml of oxygenated blood, that indicate that blood moves from lungs to the tissues. So from the option, we can eliminate these two options because they are telling that it is towards the alveoli. As it is an oxygenated blood, definitely it is moving from lungs to tissues. So we eliminated the first and the last option. Now two options are there. They are telling to the tissues. Okay. Now we'll look into the concentration. In the first option, they are telling 5 ml of oxygenated blood to the tissue. They are asking 100 ml of oxygenated blood. So we can assume that that is the answer. Every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver 5 ml of oxygen to the tissue. So this is the answer. These are the tips you can do when you are doing a question. Next one. What is correct about compound epithelium? From the word itself, you can understand that they are asking about compound epithelium. See, the first option, it is multi-layered. That is right. Compound epithelium, you know that it is always in a compound nature. That is multi-layered. That's correct. Next one, its main function is protection against chemical and mechanical stress. That's also correct. Epithelial tissue, that is the main function is protection. As it is in compound epithelium, definitely it will give you protection against stress. So this statement is also correct. Next one. They cover inner lining of ducts of salivary glands. Here, when you are thinking about salivary gland, the inner lining of salivary gland is mainly made up of cuboidal epithelium. Cuboidal epithelium. But if you are taking this is the salivary gland, just imagine that the larger portion of this salivary gland is having cuboidal as well as compound epithelium. So when you are learning about salivary gland, you might be learned that inner lining of salivary gland is made up of cuboidal epithelium. But when you are considering this salivary gland, larger portion of this salivary gland is having both cuboidal and compound epithelium. So this statement is also correct. So from the given option, all statements are correct and we can choose the answer all of these. Right? Next one. Which part of human brain is concerned with the regulation of body temperature? Option first one, cerebellum. You know that cerebellum is the center of posture, balance, controlling voluntary movement, etc. Next one, cerebrum. Cerebrum is the center of intelligence, thought, memory, concentration, assumption, etc. So they are asking body temperature, right? So next one, hypothalamus. That is the answer. Hypothalamus is responsible for regulating body temperature. It will give you feeling of thirst, feeling of hungry, etc. So the part of human brain concerned with the regulation of body temperature is hypothalamus. Let us look into other option too. Last one, they have given medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is cardiac rhythm center, which is maintaining your cardiac as well as respiratory rhythm. So answer is hypothalamus. Next one. Vector for dengue and chikungunya is. You know that dengue, chikungunya, etc. are vector-borne diseases. From the given vectors, dengue and chikungunya is spread by Aedes aegypti. Actually, the mosquito, the name is Aedes aegypti. This is also known as yellow fever mosquito. Yellow fever mosquito. Yellow fever mosquito, which is responsible for transmitting dengue, chikungunya, yellow fever, etc. So from the option, the answer is Aedes mosquito. Next, Ascaris is characterized by. Ascaris, when you are thinking about Ascaris, it is having different characters. So first we will look into the option, in what sense they are asking, then we will look into the answer. See, first one, absence of true coelom. That is right. Ascaris is pseudocoelomate. What do you mean by pseudocoelomate? They are having false coelom, right? So absence of true coelom, that is correct, as they are pseudocoelomate. Next one, they are saying presence of metamerism. In Ascaris, you know that they don't have the character of metamerism. So this one is correct and this one is wrong. So we cannot able to choose the first one. Next one, presence of neither true coelom, that is right, as it is a pseudocoelomate, they don't have a true coelom. Next one, metamerism. Yes, they don't have metamerism. So that is the answer. Presence of neither true coelom nor metamerism. Let us look into other options too. Presence of true coelom, that is not correct because they are true pseudocoelomates. Then presence of metamerism, that is also not correct. Then look into the last one, presence of true coelom but the absence of metamerism, that is also not correct, as they are pseudocoelomate, they don't have a true coelom, they don't have a metamerism. So from the option, the answer is presence of neither true coelom nor metamerism. Next one. The anterior pituitary hormone that does not stimulate other endocrine gland is. Let's look into the options first, then I'll explain. First one, somatotropin. You know that somatotropin is growth hormone, right? It is a growth hormone. Then, as it is a growth hormone, it affects on all organs, all tissues, all organ, etc. for growth. So, they are asking the anterior pituitary hormone. Yes, it is an anterior pituitary hormone. It does not stimulate other endocrine gland. That is correct. Somatotropin is not stimulating any other endocrine organ for its action because it is having direct action on all body parts. as it is a growth hormone. So as we are considering about growth, the growth is taking all over the body. So somatotropin or growth hormone having its own effect in all body parts. It is not only affect other endocrine gland. So actually this is the answer. Somatotropin, it is secreted from anterior pituitary that does not stimulate any other endocrine gland. Let us look into other options too. Next one, they are telling about thyrotropin. You know that thyrotropin means that is thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone, it stimulates which gland? Thyroid gland. So it stimulates thyroid gland for producing thyroxine. They are asking which does not. So TSH or thyrotropin, it is thyroid stimulating hormone. It stimulates an endocrine gland thyroid for secreting thyroxine. That is not the answer. Next one. Gonadotropin. You know that gonadotropin stimulates gonads. Gonadotropin stimulates gonads, that is testes and ovaries, for the production of sperm and ova. And also they are helping for, they are inducing the synthesis of sex hormones. Sex hormones. So in the question they are asking which does not stimulate. Here you can see that somatotropin, it does not stimulate any other endocrine gland as it is having direct effect on all the tissue. Now thyrotropin, that is thyroid stimulating hormone which stimulate thyroid gland for the production of thyroxine. Next one, gonadotropin, which acts on, which stimulates gonads to produce ovum and sperm, and also it is responsible for increasing the production of sex hormones. Next one, adrenocorticotropin. Adrenocorticotropin activates adrenal gland. It activates adrenal gland. It stimulates adrenal gland for the production of cortisol. So from this thing you can understand that they are asking for the hormone which does not act or stimulate another endocrine gland. Definitely you can say that it is somatotropin or growth hormone. Move into the next question. Receptors associated with aortic arch and carotid artery can recognize changes in. They are asking this aortic arch and carotid artery are the branches of aorta. You know the branches of aorta, right? Let me draw first. See, this is the picture of aorta. So aorta, we are majorly divided into three parts. This part is called ascending aorta. Ascending in the sense it is moving upward. So this is ascending aorta and this is aortic arch. This is arch-like portion called aortic arch, and this one is descending aorta. So when we are taking care of this aorta, when we are considering aorta, aorta is majorly divided into ascending aorta, aortic arch and descending aorta. This aortic arch is having a branch, main branch, that is the first branch of aortic arch is brachiocephalic artery. So this one, brachiocephalic artery, it will bifurcate into, this is left subclavian artery, left subclavian artery, and this is left carotid artery, left carotid artery. Here the second branch of aortic arch is right carotid artery, right carotid artery. This one is right subclavian artery. So aorta, it is divided into ascending, aortic arch and descending. Aortic arch, the first branch of aortic arch is brachiocephalic artery, which bifurcates into left subclavian artery and left carotid artery. Left subclavian artery gives blood to left shoulder and left part, then left carotid artery going to the left part of the brain. Then coming to the next part is right carotid artery, which gives blood to the right part of the brain, and right subclavian artery, which gives blood to the right shoulder and all. So they are asking that the receptors associated with aortic arch. So here the receptors present in the aortic arch and carotid artery. Here you can see the two carotid arteries are there. This is left carotid artery and this is right carotid artery. So they are asking the receptors present in this aortic arch, left carotid artery and right carotid artery together they have given as carotid artery can recognize. Let us look into the option. Only carbon dioxide concentration in blood. They can detect carbon dioxide concentration, but here in the option they are telling only. That's not correct. It is not only recognize carbon dioxide concentration. As they are given only, we cannot able to choose this one. Next one. Hydrogen ions and O2 concentration in blood. Actually, they can recognize oxygen concentration, but when you're thinking about oxygen and carbon dioxide, just think about that. If your tissue is getting more oxygen, what will happen? Nothing will happen. Your tissue is become more saturated. So definitely the receptors won't think about oxygen much. So here also we cannot able to choose this option. Next one, carbon dioxide and H plus concentration in blood. So you know that carbon dioxide and H plus concentration in blood, whenever carbon dioxide is increasing in blood, definitely it will give problems. So to avoid that, the receptors present in aortic arch, carotid branches, etc. recognize the amount of carbon dioxide which is present in the blood and it will give stimulation to the concerned organ. So this is correct, carbon dioxide and H plus concentration. Whenever the H plus concentration is increasing, what will happen? Acidosis will be the result. Blood will become more acidic. You know that blood has to maintain its own pH, 7.4 anyway it has to maintain. So for maintaining the normal oxygen amount and for also maintaining the pH, definitely receptors are present in the carotid and aortic artery, are present in carotid and aortic arches. So here answer option is carbon dioxide and H plus concentration in blood. Next one. Select the incorrect statement regarding the transport of gases in blood. Let us look into the option. About 97% of oxygen is transported by RBCs in the blood. That is correct. You know that about 97% of oxygen is delivered by RBC. That is the statement is correct. Next one. Carbonic anhydrase is present in very high concentration in RBC. That's also correct. Carbonic anhydrase is higher, then only we can transport maximum amount of oxygen. That is also correct. Next one, high partial pressure of carbon dioxide and low partial pressure of oxygen in tissue helps in binding carbon dioxide. That is also correct. In tissue, there will be a decreased amount of oxygen and high amount of carbon dioxide. So that is also correct. Next one, carbon dioxide is carried in hemoglobin as carboxyhemoglobin. Carbon dioxide in blood is carried as carbaminohemoglobin. Carbaminohemoglobin. It is not as carboxyhemoglobin. It is carried in hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin. In which technique to form an embryo in the laboratory, a sperm is directly injected into the ovum? First we will look into the option. First one, IVF ET. IVF means, what do you mean by IVF? In vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization, then embryo transfer. Normally in this IVF ET technique, what we are doing is we will collect the semen along with sperm. After that we will remove the semen and we will take sperm. We will take a petri dish in which ova is present. So in this petri dish we will add sperms. Not a single sperm, we are adding 2, 3, 4, we are adding it as a liquid. So it may contain number of sperms. So in a petri dish containing ovum, we are directly adding sperm to it and allow for fertilization. After some time we will keep it in the laboratory condition, we will keep medium and all, then we will form an embryo. This embryo is transferred into the uterus. So here they are asking, sperm is directly injected. Here we are not directly injected the sperm. We are introducing sperm into the petri dish which contains an ovum. So that is not the answer. Next one, ICSI. ICSI means intracytoplasmic sperm injection. ICSI means intracytoplasmic sperm injection. In the sense, consider if a male with very low sperm count, in that condition what we will do is we will take a single sperm, we will cut the head part of the sperm and we will take it in a particular microscopically assisted needle, and this needle we will entering into the ovum. So this is actually a needle which contain sperm. In that we will take a single sperm, we will cut the sperm head and we will use a needle, microscopic needle, for introducing the sperm into the ova. Here we are not introducing sperm into the petri dish or somewhere else, we will directly injected the sperm into the ova. So there is no need of going and interacting with the ovum membrane and all. That technique is called ICSI. So in the question they are asking about, in the laboratory sperm is directly injected into the ovum. Definitely that is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Think like this, in a normal IVF we are introducing sperm into a petri dish and allowing the sperm to move and approach the ovum and fertilize. But in the second we are not allowing the sperm to move and fertilize the ovum. What we do, we are introducing the sperm into the ovum using a needle, right? So the answer is ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Let us look into other option 2, GIFT. You know that it is gamete intrafallopian transfer. That is gamete intrafallopian transfer. From the word itself you can understand that if any female who is not having enough ovum or not having the capacity to produce ovum, in such female we can introduce the ovum into the fallopian tube for allowing normal fertilization. That is called gamete intrafallopian transfer. So already we have assumed the answer, I am just telling about the option. Next one, IUI, intrauterine insemination. Here too, if less amount of sperm or if sperm is not having enough motility, we will directly inject the sperm into uterus or vagina of the female. That technique is called intrauterine insemination. So from the option we can understand that the transfer of sperm directly injected into the ovum is called intracytoplasmic sperm injection, ICSI. Next question. A change in the relative abundance of an allele, that is the allelic frequency, within a population over a succession of generation is called. They are telling a relative abundance of an allele, that is allelic frequency. Just imagine that when evolution happens, the changes occurs only in an allele or occurs in an allelic frequency. Definitely that won't create a much bigger evolution. As it is an allelic frequency, so you just imagine that we human being, if any frequency changes, if any alleles changes, definitely we won't become another animal or something like that. So just imagine that it won't happen. So definitely the evolution happened as a result of this allelic frequency will be in an elementary evolution, the level of an elementary evolution. It's not a big thing. Now look into the option. First option is micro evolution. From the word itself you can understand that micro means small. Evolution. So as it is happened in an elementary level, as it is not reaching to the species level, we can confirm that allelic frequency changes can happen in micro evolution, or the changes of allele may over a success of generation is called micro evolution. That means it won't give a great or larger difference. It will produce a small change. That is called micro evolution. Look into the next option, macro evolution. Macro means big. In the sense, think about the evolution of human being. You just think that how we evolve. We are not evolving in a particular day or in a particular time. It took years, times like that. So macro evolution in the sense it's a big level. It is beyond the species. It takes a huge time. It is a large amount of evolution. Evolution takes a larger period. Such type of evolution is called macro evolution. You can give an example that evolution of human being. Evolution of human beings, or you can say that evolution of prokaryotes, eukaryotes, etc. So such type of huge evolution is called macro evolution. Next one, co-evolution. What do you mean by co-evolution? Two species, they are evolved in a mutually dependent manner. I'll say an example. For example, prey-predator. Prey and predator relationship. You just think about that. They are evolving in a mutually dependent manner. Mutually dependent manner in the sense, thinking about prey. Prey definitely, it must evolve. Why? To avoid the capture. So prey must be evolved to avoid the capture from the predator. So it is evolving. Then considering the predator, think about the predator. What predator will do? It will evolve, it must evolve to become effective hunter, because already prey has evolved. So what the predator has to do, it has to evolve to become an effective hunter. So one organism is evolving for avoiding the capture, another organism is evolving to catch. This type of evolution is called co-evolution. Prey and predator evolution is the best example of co-evolution. Next one, phylogenetic evolution. It is actually not a definitive relation, it is a hypothetical one. They are telling that it is all the organisms are coming from a common ancestor. That is called phylogenetic evolution. So in the question, as they are asking for an allelic change, we can definitely conclude that it over a succession of generation, an allelic frequency changes can cause a micro evolution. So from the answer it is micro evolution. Next one. The formation of life was preceded by chemical evolution. The statement was given by. Let's look into the option first. First one, they are telling Urey and Miller. What Urey and Miller said? They said some inorganic molecules forms spontaneously. They are not telling that chemical evolution, life is preceded by chemical evolution. They told inorganic molecules forms in the earth spontaneously. So this is not the answer. Next one, Jacob and Monod. You know that Jacob and Monod is related with operon, transcriptional control, operon. So we can eliminate this too. Next one, Fisher and Huxley. They are evolutionary biologists. They were telling much about the gene population and all. So here also. Next one, Oparin and Haldane. You know that what Oparin and Haldane said. They said life originates from chemical things. See, for example, what they said, amino acids combine together to form a polymer. So, life originates from this organic compounds combined together to form some amino acids combines together to form proteins. Like that, life originates. So, the statement the formation of life was preceded by chemical evolution by Oparin and Haldane. Your answer is Oparin and Haldane. Next one. Fetal ejection reflex is produced by. Fetal ejection reflex is responsible for the delivery of the baby, the expulsion of baby from the womb. So that is produced by, first one, fully developed fetus only. Actually, fetal ejection reflex is introduced by fully developed fetus. But as they are giving only, we cannot able to choose this as answer. Next one, placenta only. Here too, fetal ejection reflex is done by placenta as well as fetus. They both together contributing for the delivery, or they together contributing for the fetal ejection reflex. So as they are saying only, we cannot able to choose this one as the answer. Next one, fully developed fetus and placenta. Yes, that is the answer. Fully developed fetus and placenta together they give fetal ejection reflex for the production of oxytocin. When oxytocin is releasing, uterine muscle starts to contract and it leads to the expulsion of baby from the womb. Next one. What is correct about the contraceptive method shown in the diagram below? When you are seeing the picture, you can understand that it is a hormone releasing intrauterine device. See this? Let us look into the options first. It releases calcium ions that suppress sperm motility. This figure, you know that it is a figure of a hormone releasing IUD. So this option is not correct. Next one, it releases copper ions that suppress sperm motility. As it is a hormone releasing IUD, it won't release copper ions. Copper ions are released by copper releasing IUDs, right? So that is also not correct. Next one, it's a hormone releasing IUD that makes the uterus unsuitable for implantation. That is right. As it is a hormone releasing IUD, it will make the uterus endometrium unsuitable for the implantation. Likewise, it is acting as a contraceptive method. Uric acid is a nitrogenous waste in. Let's look into the option birds. Yes, birds release uric acid as it is least toxic for water conservation. In the case of birds, not only for water conservation but also for weight reduction, they are having uric acid as their nitrogenous waste. Next one, lizards. Yes, of course, lizards are also having uric acid as nitrogenous waste, again for water conservation. Next one, insects. Yes, insects are also releasing uric acid. It is uric acids are the nitrogenous waste of insects. But here in bony fishes, as they are aquatic organisms, they excrete ammonia. They are ammonotelics. They excrete ammonia because they are having enough amount of water, as it is the highest toxic material. When you are comparing nitrogenous waste, ammonia is the toxic material which needs more water to eliminate it out. Next one, frog. Frog is having urea as nitrogenous waste. Then cartilaginous fishes like shark and all, it also excrete urea. Next one, mammals. You know that we are ureotelic, we excrete urea. Next one, mollusks. Mollusks actually, major mollusks are aquatic. So, aquatic mollusks excrete ammonia. Major mollusks are aquatic mollusks, they excrete ammonia. And terrestrial one, like land snail and all, terrestrial one, they excrete uric acid. So in the question they are asking, uric acid is nitrogenous waste in. While seeing all these things, you can understand that birds and lizards both excrete uric acid as their nitrogenous wastes. Next one. The waste products produced in man are, first option, carbon dioxide. Yes, that is the major gaseous waste. That is the thing. Next one, urea and salts. Yes, kidney and other organ, they excrete urea and salts. These are also our excretory waste. Then excess of water. That is also correct. If you are drinking more water, definitely body has to eliminate it out. So excess of water, that is also correct. So from this option, the answer is all of these. We are having carbon dioxide, urea, salts, excess of water, etc. as our waste materials. So the option is all of these. Next question, which type of cell division occurs in the gonads? They're asking gonads. Okay. Think about spermatogenesis. Okay. Oogenesis and spermatogenesis we can think, but for easy understanding, I'll tell you something about spermatogenesis. Mother spermatogonia cell will undergo, this is spermatogonial mother cell, right? Spermatogonial mother cell. It will undergo mitosis to produce primary spermatocytes. So mother spermatogonial cells undergo mitosis and forms primary spermatocytes. Here, think about this. This primary spermatocytes undergo meiosis and produce secondary spermatocytes. Right? So, if you are considering the gonads, in gonads, both mitosis and meiosis is taking place. Mitosis is for the increasing the number of cell, whereas meiosis is for reducing the chromosome number. So, from the option, which type of cell division occurs in the gonads? First one, mitosis only. As they are giving only, it is not correct. Second one, meiosis. We cannot able to tell that meiosis only. We cannot able to tell like this. Next one, both mitosis and meiosis. That is correct. See, here both mitosis and meiosis is taking place. So, from the option we can choose that both mitosis and meiosis. Gigantism and dwarfism are the disease related to. Gigantism and dwarfism. It is related to what? Growth hormone. Gigantism is a condition of excess growth, large body size, and dwarfism comparatively it is a small thing. So gigantism and dwarfism are the disease related to growth hormone. From where growth hormone is released? It is from the anterior pituitary, adenohypophysis. So let us look into the option. Prolactin hormone of mammary gland. Prolactin is a milk hormone which is not concerned with this gigantism and dwarfism. As it is a milk hormone, it is responsible for the production of milk in mammary gland. So we cannot able to take this. Next one, growth hormone of adenohypophysis. Yes, if excess amount of growth hormone is produced, the condition is called gigantism. If decreased amount of growth hormone is produced, we can call it as dwarfism. So, gigantism and dwarfism caused due to the increased or decreased amount of growth hormone. If it is an increased amount, we can call it as gigantism. If it is produced in a very decreased amount, we can call it as dwarfism. So, growth hormone of adenohypophysis, that is the answer. Next one, luteinizing hormone of pituitary gland. Luteinizing hormone is responsible for the maintenance of corpus luteum. And also, it is responsible for ovulation. You have studied about LH Surge and all. So, it is responsible for ovulation as well as it is responsible for the maintenance of corpus luteum. It does not have any connection with gigantism and dwarfism. Next one, thyroid stimulating hormone of thyroid gland. Thyroid stimulating hormone, you know that it activates thyroid gland to produce thyroxine. It is having some impacts on the metabolism, but it does not directly affect on this gigantism and dwarfism. So we can conclude that gigantism and dwarfism are the disease due to the disease related to growth hormone of adenohypophysis. Next one. Allergy is due to the release of which of the chemical from mast cells and basophils? Allergy is an exaggerated response of the body. This exaggerated response is due to the overactivation of this mast cells and basophils. So when these mast cells and basophils are overactivated, they produce an exaggerated response called allergy. Unwanted, exaggerated, inappropriate response. So here, for producing such type of exaggerated, inappropriate response, they produce two substances, histamine and serotonin. Heparin, that is an anticoagulant, that is not having any relation when we are considering it with allergy. So allergy is due to the release of histamine and serotonin from mast cells and basophils. Now we can look into the option. So answer is A and C. Yes. Your option C, A and C is the answer. Next one. Somatostatin is growth hormone. That is what it is. It is actually a peptide hormone. When you were study about endocrine system, you have studied that different types of hormones are there. Peptide nature hormones, steroid nature hormones, likewise different nature hormones are there based on what it is made up of. So somatostatin is a peptide hormone. So there is nothing to explain much. It is a peptide hormone. Now they are asking about which of the following sets is of flightless bird. Let us look into the options first. First option, Columba. Columba, you know that it is pigeon, right? Pigeon, you know, it is a flying bird. Then Psittacula. Psittacula is parrot. It's a genus of parrot. So that is also flying bird. Next one, Struthio. Struthio is ostrich. Then Aptenodytes. Aptenodytes means penguin. Penguin genus. Next one, Corvus or crow. Then again Columba, Columba pigeon. Then Pavo. Pavo is peacock. Then Neophron. Neophron is vulture. Now there is no need to explain much. They are asking for flightless birds. So from the option you can understand that it is ostrich and penguin, that is Struthio and Aptenodytes, your option B. Which is the common character between all the mammals? They are asking about mammals characters. First one, they are oviparous. We cannot able to tell that all the animals are oviparous because oviparity, viviparity, everything is exhibited mammals. So we cannot able to tell all the mammals are oviparous. That's a wrong statement. Next one, they are herbivorous. Herbivores are there, carnivores are there, omnivores are there, all are there. So again, we cannot able to tell that all the mammals are herbivores. So that is also not correct. Next one, they are telling they are carnivores. That is also not correct. I told you that they are herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, etc. are there in mammals. So we cannot able to conclude that all the mammals are carnivores. Next one, they have 7 cervical vertebrae. Among the given option, this is the most appropriate one. They have 7 cervical vertebrae. But here an exception is there, like sloth bear. It is having 6 to 9 cervical vertebrae. It varies from 6 to 9. So we cannot able to tell that all the mammals, but most commonly all mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae. There is a exception, that is sloth bear. Then sea cow. Next exception is sea cow. It is having 6 cervical vertebrae. So all other mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae. So from the given option, we can select they have 7 cervical vertebrae. The gastric juice contains. Gastric juice means juice from the stomach. Let us look into the option. First one, trypsin. Trypsin, you know that it is the part of intestinal juice. Trypsin is a protein digesting enzyme present in intestinal juice. So we cannot able to tell, or we cannot able to select this as answer because they are asking for the gastric juice. Trypsin is a part of intestinal juice, so I just cut this option. Next one, pepsin. Yes, pepsin is a protein digesting enzyme present in the gastric juice. That is correct. Then lipase. It is a fat digesting enzyme present. We cannot able to tell that fat digesting enzyme, but still fat digesting enzyme present in the gastric juice. Then renin. It is also protein digesting enzyme present in infants. So all these are the part of gastric juice. Pepsin, protein digesting enzyme present in adult. Lipase, fat digesting enzyme present in gastric juice. Then renin, protein digesting enzyme present in infants. So we can choose the answer. The gastric juice contain pepsin, lipase and renin. Mark the correct statement with respect to SIFT. They are asking about SIFT. SIFT means zygote intra-fallopian transfer. The full form of SIFT is zygote intra-fallopian transfer. Let us look into the option. First option, they are telling ova collected from a female donor are transferred to the fallopian tube to facilitate zygote formation. Here we are giving ova, not zygote, ova to the donor's fallopian tube to facilitate zygote formation. So it is not SIFT, it is GIFT. GIFT in the sense gamete intra-fallopian transfer. We are transferring it into the fallopian tube. What we are transferring? We are transferring gamete. Ova we are transferring. Ova is the gamete, right? Then question they are asking zygote. It's not gamete, so we cannot able to choose this. Next one. Woman's egg is fertilized outside the body and then zygote is transferred to the fallopian tube. What is transferring? Zygote is transferring. Where we are transferring? Fallopian tube. So we can assume that it is zygote intra-fallopian transfer. This is our answer. Anyway, let us look into other options too. Woman's egg is fertilized outside the body and then zygote is transferred to the uterus. If we are transferring something into the uterus, definitely it is not a zygote, it will be an embryo. Zygote transfer we will do only in the fallopian tube. If it forms an embryo, definitely we will transfer that embryo into the womb or uterus. So that is actually an embryo transfer. Here they are asking about zygote intra-fallopian transfer. So you know that it is not the answer. Next one, ova collected from a female donor and transferred to the uterus. We cannot able to transfer ova to the uterus. When we are looking into the structure, the fallopian tube is the place where fertilization takes place. So we cannot able to transfer ova into the uterus. That is also wrong. So here the answer is egg is fertilized outside the body and zygote is transferred into the fallopian tube. Next one. The longest bone of human body is. First one, humerus. You know that, humerus. It is an arm bone that from shoulder to the elbow. I'll write like this. You know all these things, I think. Shoulder to elbow. Right. Next one, tibia. Tibia, you know that. It is the leg bone. It's from leg. It is leg from knee to ankle joints. Then vertebra. That is actually individual 33 vertebrae are there. We cannot able to tell that it is the longest bone. So I am just eliminating this first. Then femur. Femur, you know that it is the longest and strongest bone in the body from hips to knee. So from the option, that is the longest bone of the human body is femur. Longest and strongest bone of the human body is femur. Next one. Observe the given diagram and read the statement carefully and identify the correct ones. Just look at the picture. First we will mark what they have mentioned in the picture. Then we will look into the given statements. A, what A indicates? A is vas differens. Then B, you can see that it is bulbourethral gland. So A is vas deferens, B is bulbourethral gland, C is epididymis, then D is testis. See, A vas deferens, B bulbourethral gland, C epididymis, and D is testis. Now look into the statement. They're telling A carries urine and sperms. What A? A is vas deferens. You know that vas deferens carry only sperm. They carry only sperm, not urine. So this statement is false. Next one. B secretes a fluid that helps in the lubrication of penis. That is right. What is B? B is bulbourethral gland. The secretion of bulbourethral gland helps in the lubrication of penis. That is correct. Next one. D produces testosterone but not sperms. What is D? D is testis. Testis produce testosterone, that is correct, and they are telling not sperm. That is not correct. Sperms are produced from the testis. So this is also not correct. Next one, C stores sperms. What is C? C is epididymis. That is correct. Epididymis is responsible for storing sperm for a period of time. So here the statement second one and fourth one is correct. Option C, second and fourth one. B secrete, that is bulbourethral gland secretes a fluid that helps in the lubrication of penis. That is correct. Next one, epididymis stores sperms. So the statement 2 and 4 correct. Your option is C. 3 of the following pairs of the human skeletal parts are collectively matched with their respective inclusive skeletal category and one pair is not matched. Identify the non-matching pair. First one, pair of skeletal parts, they have given sternum and ribs. Category they have given as axial skeleton. You know that sternum and ribs are the part of axial skeleton. That is the correct statement. Next one, clavicle and glenoid cavity, pelvic girdle. When you are hearing, you can understand that it is the part of what? Pectoral girdle. So as they are giving as pelvic girdle, it is not correct and they are asking for the non-matching pair. So this is correct. Pairs of skeletal parts, clavicle and glenoid cavity is the part of pectoral girdle. So your answer choice is B. Next one, pairs of skeletal parts, humerus and ulna, that is the part of appendicular skeleton. That is also correct. Next one, malleus and stapes, that is ear ossicles. So except the statement B, all are correct. So you can choose incorrect one as clavicle and glenoid cavity, pelvic girdle. What are the adaptations seen in animals that live in water scarcity condition? Water scarce condition. Let's look into the option. They are having a thick coat to minimize the evaporative desiccation. That is correct. Say for example, cuticle, chitin, etc. to avoid the evaporative desiccation. Next one, oxidizing stored fat. So this statement is correct. Next statement, oxidizing stored fat to produce water as byproduct. Normally, when fat is oxidizing, carbon dioxide, water and oxygen is produced. So carbon dioxide, it will go as major waste product, it will go through the lungs. So in case of animals, as an adaptation, we can tell that they oxidize fat for producing water because they are in such a condition where they are not getting enough water. So they make use of their stored fat for getting water. So this is also correct. Next one, they are producing a very concentrated urine and solid feces. That is right. As they are living in a such condition, water scarce condition, definitely their urine is concentrated and solid feces. That is also correct. So from the given option, you can understand that all the options are correct and we can choose the answer as all of these. Mark the non-invasive technique without any side effects to diagnose the cancer of internal organs. Let's look into the options first. First one, radiography. Radiography, you know that we can tell that it is an imaging technique. Radiography is an imaging technique which uses ionizing radiations like X-rays, gamma rays, etc. So in general, all this imaging technique like X-ray, CT scan, ultrasound scan, MRI, etc. everything will come under the category of radiography. So it's an imaging technique which uses X-ray, gamma rays, etc. It is non-invasive. Non-invasive in the sense we are not giving any rupture, any wound, or any surgical procedure is not done. So the next one, so it is correct, in non-invasive, that is correct. Next one, they are asking any side effects. Here one problem, as it is using ionizing radiations like X-rays and gamma rays, it may induce mutation, heritable change in your DNA, and it can cause cancer of some other organ. It is not happens in all cases, but it is having side effect as mutation may happens. How many times you are exposed into the such type of radiation, your chance of getting such type of mutation will be increasing. So in the question, as they are telling non-invasive technique and without any side effect, we cannot able to choose radiography because radiography includes all the imaging techniques which uses ionizing and non-ionizing radiation which may cause some side effects like mutation. So I am just not selecting this. Next one, computed tomography. Computed tomography is known as CT scan. You may heard about CT scan, right? So when you're thinking about CT scan, it is also using to analyze the cancer of internal organs. That may be correct. But here also one problem. They are using in a computed tomography images taken with the help of X-rays. X-rays passing through different angles of internal organs. So that may cause some mutations, or it can lead to some side effects. So here also we cannot able to select CT scan. Moreover than that, whenever doing the CT scan and all, for easy visibility, we will give some injections and all. That may cause some side effects or increased beat or some side effects it may cause. So as they are asking for without any side effect, we cannot able to choose computed tomography. Because why I am explaining all these things, because once you are seeing all these things, you feel that radiography, CT, etc. we are using to diagnose the cancer, that is the thing, and it is a non-invasive technique. So you may be confused. Next one, histopathological studies. What do you mean by histo? Histo means tissue. Tissue pathology. So actually histopathological study is, that is the confirmative or the confirmative diagnostic technique to detect the cancer. But the thing is that it is not non-invasive. It is actually biopsy needs. We need biopsy. Histopathological, we have to take that particular tissue for analyzing its pathology. You just imagine that. We are suspecting a cancer in some internal organs like stomach or intestine somewhere. Then for identifying, then for histopathological studies, we have to take out that particular tissue through a surgery or through a needle biopsy. Then only we can analyze it for the detection of cancer. So we cannot able to tell it as it is non-invasive. So that is also wrong. Next one, magnetic resonance imaging. When you are thinking about all this radiographic technique, it is the least, it is having least side effects. That is the advantage over computed tomography. When you are comparing CT scan with magnetic resonance imaging, as it is using a magnetic field, it does not have the side effect of such type of rays. That means you are free from such type of mutation. So non-invasive technique without any side effect to diagnose the cancer of internal organ, you can choose magnetic resonance imaging or MR. Given below is a diagrammatic sectional view of the mammary gland. Select the option which indicates the correct labeling. Let's look into the picture first. A indicates lactiferous duct. A indicates lactiferous duct. What about B? B is ampulla. B is ampulla. And what about C? C indicates mammary ducts. I'll explain once again. A indicates lactiferous duct, B indicates ampulla, and C indicates mammary ducts. D indicates pectoralis. Okay, so once again, A indicates lactiferous duct, B indicates ampulla, and C indicates mammary ducts, D indicates pectoralis. Now look into the option. They are telling A is ampulla. No, what A is? A is lactiferous duct. I'll write as LD, lactiferous duct. B indicates mammary alveolus. What B indicates? B indicates ampulla. B indicates ampulla, so that is also not correct. Next one, they are telling C indicates lactiferous duct. What C indicates? C indicates mammary ducts. It is not lactiferous duct, it is mammary ducts. Next one, D indicates pectoralis major. That is correct. D indicates pectoralis muscle. This is correct. So from the given figure and given option, your answer choice is D. D indicates pectoralis major. Next one. The blood of cockroach contain no respiratory pigment. It means that. Let's look into the option. First one, cockroach does not respire. We cannot able to tell that cockroach does not respire, then it will die. So this is not correct. Next one, respiration is anaerobic. Definitely not. As it uses oxygen, we cannot able to tell that respiration is anaerobic. Next one, oxygen goes directly into the tissues by diffusion. That is correct. Tracheal tubes. Deliver oxygen to the tissues where through diffusion oxygen is entering into the tissue. So this is the correct one. Oxygen goes directly to the tissues by diffusion through tracheal tubes. That is the correct one. Anyway, let us look into the next one too. O2 goes into tissue by intracellular capillary system. There is no such capillary system to deliver oxygen. So this is also not correct. So from the answer choice, your answer is the blood of cockroach contain no respiratory pigment. It means that oxygen goes directly into the tissues by diffusion through tracheal tubes. That's all about the questions. You just read your textbook and try to do the questions. If you're having any doubt or any query, please contact us. Thank you so much.